As Neptune entered the sign of Cancer ruled by the emotionally reflective moon, an era of magic and mysticism meets modernism via a Neptune-Uranus opposition. With Neptune in home and country, Cancer begins the greatest free immigration in human history, 13 million Europeans making the USA their home during the Neptune-Cancer period. With film being made from moon-rilled silver nitrate, Neptune entering the lunar sign of Cancer brought a new flow to the narrative of film. While Neptune in opposition to technological Uranus for much of the decade, the introduction of editing techniques was as transformational as the new art form itself. With Neptune in feminine Cancer, film produced the first starlets of the newly projected silver screen, often chorus girls adored by the public but poorly paid, encouraging Cancer's polarity of financial Capricorn with a media-constructed chorus girl millionaire's marriage market. The Lumiere brothers, whose film projection system marked the end of Edison's sideshow-oriented kinetoscope, created autochrome color film in 1907 during Neptune opposite technological Uranus. Apt for Neptune in the delicate and hazy lunar sign of Cancer, autochrome created a soft, gentle, blurred, and moody aesthetic not unlike a painting. One of the earliest supermodels, the stunning Evelyn Nesbit, became an American cultural celebrity as Neptune in Cancer opposed her Capricorn sun. Evelyn Nesbit's dreamy image dominated the media of the time, appearing in mass circulation newspapers, magazines, and calendars. Symbolic of her natal relationship, Venus opposite deathly Pluto, her abusive multimillionaire husband shot her ex-lover at a theater in New York in 1906, marking the most sensational murder trial of the era. With Neptune in the sign of family, the new progressives believed government's role should keep families together. Birth control is a hotly contested issue. Reeling from the widespread plutonic corruption of the previous Neptune-Pluto era, women's suffrage was seen as a purer vote, with women gaining the vote in several countries and gained influence in the USA through local and state legislation. With the Neptune-Uranus opposition activating Cancer's polarity of financial Capricorn, the new wealthy elite were introduced to philanthropy, melding Neptunian compassion within a Capricornian business model. And eugenics, the Capricornian Cancer philosophy of selective breeding to improve society, took root at this time. With Neptune in Cancer opposite technological Uranus in Capricorn, a decade of massive cultural change ensued. Einstein published his theory of relativity and revolutionized physics. Crowley published the blasphemous Book of the Law, declaring the birth of a new aeon. As Neptune had just slipped into Cancer in 1901, opposed by Saturn, President McKinley is assassinated. Over the next decade, Neptune would cross over the USA's stellium of Cancer planets in opposition to Uranus, creating massive cultural change and a blueprint of the modern USA. This included the Black Patch Tobacco Wars, a battle between the American Tobacco Capricornian monopoly and the Dark Tobacco Association of Farmers, turning violent with the destruction of crops and machinery by the farmers' special militant brigade known as the Night Riders. In 1904, with Neptune conjunct New York City's natal Mars in Cancer, and subterranean Pluto conjunct the city's natal Gemini Mercury, the New York City subway is officially open. At this time, sexualized and powerful Pluto was also conjunct the US's natal Mars in Gemini, with the founding of high-stakes Sin City, Las Vegas. The US military intervening in several foreign coups, and the first ever bodybuilding championship at Madison Square Garden. The stock market panic of 1907 as Neptune conjunct the USA's Cancer Sun, opposed by radical Uranus in corporate Capricorn. And let's not forget the birth of Mother's Day with Neptune on America's maternal Cancer sun.
If you love me, would you say if I said I like you well? I sound to you on bended knee, on bended knee. If I love you, would you tell me what I ought to keep you all mine and all? Always true to me, if I love you, would you see how
Gun violence aspect Mars square Neptune occurred while Neptune was conjunct the USA's Messenger Mercury in October 1912, with former President Theodore Roosevelt delivering a speech freshly after an assassination attempt, still bleeding with the bullet inside him, refusing to go to hospital till after his speech was delivered. In the UK, while its Capricorn sun was aspected by Uranus and Neptune, the royal family accept the inevitable transfer of power in the new democratic era. Widespread labour reform and disputes erupts. Suffragists begin a series of public protests disrupting state parliament, and Sinn Féin is created as Cancerian nationalism spreads throughout Ireland. As Neptune conjuncted Uranus opposed the UK's natal Cancer moon, Uranian labour battles as diverse as the textile industry to coal mining reach their violent zenith. Suffragettes escalate their public disobedience, resulting in a brutal legal clampdown. And the creation of the highly secretive intelligence agency MI6. With unconventional Uranus opposite Neptune in Cancer, a new movement of bohemia spreads to large urban areas, particularly New York's East Village, where cafes become a hotbed of radical politics and artistic creativity. This was also the beginning of the famous Bloomsbury Set, a group of socially progressive writers, intellectuals and artists, including Virginia Woolf and John Maynard Keynes. Neptune opposing revolutionary Uranus in financial Capricorn. The original version for the game Monopoly is created, called the Landlord's Game. Although far from the modern version, the original game, inspired by the left-wing writings of Henry George, was intended to prove his theories on how the ownership of land creates poverty. Taking the Uranus-Neptune opposition literally, France adds the separation of church and state to the constitution. With mysticism and modernist views edging away at Christianity's utter dominance, the image of the wart-covered, hook-nosed witch was replaced with beautiful sorceresses with blushing cheeks. The lunar magic of illusionists and the glamour of mysticism was elevated to new heights. With the rise of the Theosophical Society, the Golden Dawn, the Druid Order, and Crowley's Thelemic OTO. The radical Uranus-Neptune opposition transformed the tarot as we know it today, with the Rider-Waite Tarot deck in 1910 marking a substantial departure from the Christian imagery of its predecessors. The controversial and scandalous Tantric Order of America is created by Pierre Bernard, later known as the Great Om, and responsible decades later for bringing a more body-conscious version of Hatha Yoga to America. The radical Uranus opposition brought a new political awareness to fiction of the time. Neptune in sentimental Cancer encouraged a new nostalgic melodrama in the opera of the time, with Nellie Melba rising to worldwide fame. Opera also garnered the first million-selling record, making both the public and performers view records as valid cultural items, as opposed to the crude novelty items of the previous era. With the technological influence of Uranus, records as we know it today transformed from playable on only one side with horrible sound quality to a higher quality now suitable for music. Edison, whose obsession with trademarking and refusing to let other companies make his unique and initially higher quality cylinders, eventually lost the format war to the fastly developing and less controlled technology of the record. Neptune in home and country Cancer brought much nationalism to popular music with an ethnic pastiche, influencing vaudeville and the emerging Broadway.
I'm the kid that's all the candy. I'm a Yankee Doodle dandy. I'm glad
Apt for Cancer, sentimental ballads were consistently popular. Although with Neptune opposing revolutionary Uranus and authoritative Capricorn, much of the raw acoustic music at the time was awash in the taboo of sex, dancing, and a not always obvious cheery anti-authoritarianism. The Neptune and emotional Cancer era birthed the blues. The exciting new emotionally sophisticated sound of the blues would go on to profoundly influence 20th century music. In true Uranian style, when American composer W.C. Handy first heard the blues at a Mississippi train station in 1903, he described it as the weirdest music he had ever heard. He went on to be the first to publish and popularize the blues.
Night was mighty dark, so you could hardly see, for the moon refused to shine. Couple sitting underneath a willow tree, for love they pine.
Although during the previous era of Neptune conjunct Pluto, Gustav Klimt's work had been criticized as pornographic, when Neptune conjunct his Mercury in Cancer in 1907, his elegant obsession with the feminine made him famous.
Oh, shine on, harvest moon, up in the sky. I ain't had no loving since April, January, June, or July. Snow time ain't no time to stay outdoors and spoon. So shine on, harvest moon, for me and my gal. You know, honey, I just love you. I don't call that loving, keep me out here in the dark.
Cancer's emotional subjectivity came to light with Expressionism, distorting art radically to evoke moods and feelings.
Sort of that. Oh, please, Mr. Moon.
And with the Iranian beginnings of modernism, the practice of collage questioned the essential and artistic truthfulness of photography.
Time to stay outdoors and spoon.
In fashion, with Cancer's traditional rulership of the breasts, it's not surprising the popularity of the new S-shaped corset. The hourglass shape was back in fashion, and for children with Neptune in watery Cancer, the sailor look was in. Many regard the Neptune in Cancer era as the last age of elegance, with the moon's gentler silhouette influencing softer fabrics, wilting sleeves, silk and lace.
Little pocket knight is afraid of the dark.
Fashion designer Paul Poiret, whom created the first ever fashion shoot, encouraged photographers to view fashion as fine art.
When off to bed they go. Yama, 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 man, terrible eyes.
Influenced by the Uranus-Neptune opposition, the structural simplicity of his clothing represented a pivotal moment in the emergence of modernism that would take form in the 1920s.
Ready to scream or that you are nowhere. Run to your mama, boy, he comes the yama, yama man.
With Neptune in the feminine sign of Cancer opposite radical Uranus in patriarchal Capricorn, several prominent women challenged the status quo during a time of radical cultural change.
They want to see if all the girls are wearing much or not.
Although the dress code for women was still quite conservative, Australian vaudeville star and swimmer Annette Kellerman, born with Neptune conjunct Venus-Pluto, was arrested in 1907 in Massachusetts for public indecency.
Terrible eyes and a face of tan. If you don't watch out,
Although modified versions of her swimsuit became an instant hit, it would take till the 1920s for her scandalous design to become the height of fashion. Kellerman's Uranian belief was she was liberating women to truly experience freedom of movement. At the same time, we had the Isadora Bells featuring Isadora Duncan, radically challenging dance concepts of the day, also in favor of greater freedom of movement. In May 1911, symbolic of Uranus's transit through corporate Capricorn, American Tobacco and Rockefeller's Standard Oil were declared illegal monopolies by the US Supreme Court and were forced to break up into multiple smaller companies. At this time, Saturn and Mercury were transiting Standard Oil's monopolizing Jupiter-Pluto conjunction, while Uranus was conjunct and Neptune opposed to Standard Oil's Sun. With hard-working Mars conjunct Neptune opposite expansive Jupiter in financial Capricorn, one of the most influential industrialists of the 20th century, Henry Ford, on December 1st, 1913, created the moving assembly line. But the new, highly monotonous assembly line work was extremely unpopular, with a phenomenal high turnover of workers, leading to Ford's clever promotional concept of the $5 a day wage, almost twice the standard wage at the time. Although good PR, the actual $5 rarely materialized. It was in fact half wage and half bonus, but these bonuses came with many requirements. Ford had a socialization organization that visited workers' homes to ensure they were doing things the American way. Finding that workers gambled, drank, lived immorally in de facto relationships, or even kept messy homes could be reasons for being fired, or at the very least denied the bonus wage. With Neptune opposing Jupiter conjunct the USA's natal Pluto in the house of money and resources, the US Federal Reserve is created, both a private banking cartel and the central banking system of the United States. Only moments previous to Neptune entering maternal Cancer, Freud introduces the Oedipal complex in his book The Interpretations of Dreams. And in 1913, as Jung parts company with Freud, he coins the lunar mother-daughter psychosexual conflict, the Electra complex. With Neptune opposed by regal Jupiter and a plutonic stellium in Gemini, woman suffragette martyr Emily Davidson's death by throwing herself under the king's horse created massive public sympathy for the suffragettes movement. In 1914, with judicial Jupiter conjunct radical Uranus, America's most renowned astrologer, Evangeline Adams, fights a legal battle over New York's anti-fortune-telling laws. In her defense, she drew up the astrology chart of the presiding judge's son. So impressed was he that he not only dropped the charges, but in the judge's closing statement proclaimed Adams' skill took astrology to that of a science rather than fortune-telling.
Burning in the wild wood, if to thee
ultimately with Cancer's theme of home and country and the inevitable economic changes of Uranus in Capricorn, and imperialist nationalism spreads across Europe, setting the stage for the war to end all wars.